this is me coming to mention that I totally forgot to say this when I was filming this initially, is that I mentioned that she was a black woman, which sounds on its own just like kind of inconsequential, but she only killed black families. So I thought that was just like an interesting part of like what motivated her sort of to do it, and just like to know kind of this background about her. And I'm sure that was definitely part of like tied to like her father's abuse, and even though there was a really big religious element to it, that there was definitely a little bit of like a revenge factor sort of in it. So enjoy the video. Hello. So this is my serial killer project for psychology. Really hard to believe that it is literally like the last week of school next week. So this is crazy, but I thought it'd be really cool to do a video of this, because I just feel like this information would be, I mean, like, I think it's definitely interesting. It'd be a lot easier for me to explain it, like just talking about it. So here we go. I did Clementine Barnabet. She was a black woman born in 1894. She first started killing in 1911. And a little bit of history before that. So she was born in St. Martinsville, Louisiana. Her dad was Raymond and her mom was Nina. Raymond was reportedly very abusive to the family. And so then they moved to Lafayette in 1909. So that was her dad Raymond, her mom Nina, and her brother Zephyrin. And so when they moved in 1909, her and her father Raymond and her brother Zephyrin started a cult called the Church of Sacrifice. So then this is a little later on in 1911 when she was 17 years old. And they were teaching people that basically those who Raymond and Clementine specifically deemed to be like families that were sinners, if their followers killed them, then they would gain eternal life. So basically their cult wasn't like, you know, it was definitely motivated by religion, but it wasn't just like, oh, let's, you know, we'll teach you our ways and all this stuff. It was like, no, you kill these families and like God will reward you in return. And that's what they believe, and that's what they led their followers to believe as well. And I find cults fascinating in general. And especially fascinating for if you join one and you start killing entire families because of it. Definitely just like an interesting place to find yourself in, sort of. And so basically there was a lot of murders that she committed, that her father did, that her brother did, and that their followers did. So there's definitely a lot. She ultimately, when she was caught, confessed to 17 murders of her own, but 35 that the cult had kind of done together. So there were a lot that was more of a group thing. There were also definitely, I mean, at least probably half of that she had personally committed herself. So basically her kind of her MO was basically she would use an axe and she would just basically really like butcher these families. It would be anywhere from like an adult, like any of the parents, to one time killing an 11-month-old. So I'm kind of jumping around here in like the requirements and questions and stuff, but I hope that's okay. So she was never like diagnosed or treated for any sort of mental illness. I would guess that she had some sort of PTSD and maybe depression from the abuse that she suffered. And then I would just think that she had to be some sort of psychopath or sociopath to be able to, I mean, one, just for these types of murders, like to commit murders in the first place, but also to kill children or infants, babies. And they were people that they saw as sinners, but these were innocent people. And obviously, even if, you know, you've done something wrong, it's never okay to kill someone. So I think that, especially with the nature of her crimes, there had to be some sort of sociopathic or psychopathic element just like going on in her mind. So she started killing when she was 17, and she was arrested and convicted when she was 18. So there was never really like an adult life that she got to have that like affected anything or any of her decisions. She didn't like, there was no report of really like a lot of friends or a relationship, but she wasn't necessarily like a loner because she had her brother. She still had her dad in a way, which has got to be some sort of like Stockholm syndrome ish sort of thing. You know, that's not exactly what it is, but there's got to be some sort of like, her father was definitely abusive, but she still was like not with him, but like definitely connected to him. And then she also had all of the members of the cult, which is called the Church of Sacrifice. So I don't think that she was necessarily a loner, but she didn't have friends or a relationship like outside of her family or the cult that her and her father started. So she first started killing, just a little of a timeline, in February 1911. And she initially, or at the end, she confessed to 17 murders, and she was sentenced to life in prison in October of 1912. She was sentenced to the Angola State Penitentiary, and a little bit more on that I'm saving for the end because it's kind of crazy what ended up happening there. I would say, for like classifications of like what type of killer she was, I would say it was kind of a mix between the power junkie and like the average Joe. Because in the power junkie like definition, it was like, you know, really like thriving off of their kills and not giving away any information to the police, and like relishing in, oh, they had all of the facts and the law enforcement didn't. So it wasn't that sort of thing, because she confessed pretty easily after she was arrested. But I feel like there's definitely an element of like, I mean, there's gotta be rage, and there's such a like very strong religious element in it, that I feel like that's where I sort of get that from. But then there's also just kind of like the average Joe, because there wasn't like, she didn't have like a ruse, there wasn't like a trickery, she wasn't like, you know, seducing anyone or trying like putting charms on anyone. And that probably part of that came from that she was a woman and not a man, and like a lot more times like it'd be easier for men to probably like lure women in, and more of her kills were just motivated in like, she thought that she would receive some sort of religious persecution for what she did. And so it was a lot more, I would say, kind of like mission oriented. But I would say average Joe because that was more the one than any of the others that fitted her description, because it was just her, she was just kind of like, for all intents and purposes, she was just kind of like a normal woman. But she believed in this religious factor so strongly that she murdered 17, it was either people or families, but she murdered a lot of people. So that would be like how I like would classify her for that. And then the way that she was kind of like arrested and found. So at first the police thought that it was just pretty much Raymond that was committing the murders. Now he's definitely committing some of them, but while he was in police custody, Clementine murdered another family. So that was, I mean, definitely a sign that it wasn't just him. And then while Raymond was in custody, Clementine and her brother Zephyrin realized that if he like cracked under the pressure, they would be done for, which is kind of odd considering how easily she confessed when she was arrested. But because of this, they both testified against him in court, to make him just look as guilty as possible so that they could just like get off with nothing. But she did murder another family while he was in custody, so not really doing much for her case on that one. So then they realized that he was not acting alone, and they investigated a little bit more and found bloodstained clothing pieces in Clementine's closet. So I mean, that's a pretty good indicator that she did something wrong. And also part of her signature as well was she would lay the families like in bed for like that to be the way that they were found. And I don't know what that was really a sign of. If maybe it was kind of like a sign of remorse, and she really did like deep down feel bad about it, but she was just so tied to this like abusive father that she had, and she believed so strongly in this religion that it almost felt like a compulsion. And also, just a little bit of an extra fact, one time she did shoot someone like right in the head. Really, her like MO was, you know, really like bashing in your like their heads with an axe, or she occasionally cut off people's heads as well, but she did one time shoot one man in the back of the head. So yeah, that's just about like kind of like her timeline, and what happened there. And then once she was arrested after they found the bloodstained clothing in her closet, she confessed. She confirmed the existence of the church, saying that they had altogether committed 35 murders, and 17 of which she had done herself. And after that, I mean, the church was destroyed, and like followers were arrested, Raymond, Zephyrin, and Clementine, and the church was no longer in existence. She was totally able to like withstand trial and stuff, but then she was at the end sentenced to life in prison for murder. And now here's like the last sort of like really like interesting thing that I found out about it. So she's definitely not still alive because she was born in 1894. But a little bit of an interesting thing that happened. So she was convicted in October of 1912. And then in July of 1913, she tried to escape prison. She was caught. And then 10 years later, in August of 1923, she walked out of prison, and she was never seen from or heard from again. So I thought that was a really like interesting and super mysterious, weird like end to this. Because I don't know if it was because it was 1923 and was security in prison lax because it was almost 100 years ago. I don't know. You would think even back then you wouldn't be able to just walk out of prison, but I assume she got something together over the 10 years after she was caught for trying to escape. I assume that she had gathered some sort of information or intel or ability to be able to walk out of prison, and no one knows what happened to her after that. I mean, there's obviously no way that she's still alive, she was born in 1894, but no one knows what ended up actually happening to her. I assume she died of natural causes. She could have gotten murdered herself, I don't know. So yeah, I just thought that was a really interesting end to that, and that is basically the story of Clementine Barnabet. I know this got a little long, so I'm sorry if you have to watch this whole thing, but I kind of got really into this, and I thought that it was really interesting. I love watching Criminal Minds and crime shows and stuff about serial killers, so this was really interesting to research. And yeah, there's my project. Thank you for watching, and bye!